ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Warframe Grandpa Edition. I'm your host of the most, as always, Francois878, and today I'd like to talk to you guys about 3 different shotguns that are generally forgotten about by the Warframe community, and that being the Convectrix, the Dragoon, and the Phage. Now, the reason these shotguns are generally forgotten about is because the Heck and the Tigress exist. Those 2 shotguns are absolutely god-tier, end-game, triple S weapons that everybody loves, everybody uses, myself included. And so when people see these shotguns, they're like, I'm not even going to bother. And that's sad, really, because these weapons all have generally unique mechanics amongst shotguns, and they're definitely viable up until roughly Sword T level content. And I'm going to show that off to you guys today. The Convectrix, which is the first weapon we're going to be talking about, and what you guys have been watching me use for the last few minutes, is a Corpus Beam shotgun that is quite interesting to use due to its firing mechanic, which is basically you have 2 beams horizontally placed that when you start firing the weapon are far away, but as you continue to fire the weapon, they close in and form a single beam. That can change how you fight groups of enemies versus single targets, and it's just a little different than if you were using the Heck or the Tigress. Now, as far as the specific stats for this weapon, it will deal 80 slash, 10 puncture, and 10 impact for a total of 100 physical damage, which is actually a little different and weird considering it's a Corpus weapon. This weapon does have a 25% chance to inflict status effects, which means we're going to be modding for status, a 10% crit chance, a 2x crit multiplier, and a fire rate of 3 rounds per second. Now, obviously, this is a beam weapon, so you will have to worry about the range. However, I find myself staying closer to enemies when I'm using the shotguns anyways, so the range isn't necessarily as much of an issue. Now, the builds that I'm going to be showing off are a little different depending on the build. I tried to kind of do different things with these builds just to kind of keep things a little weird and interesting. Now, obviously, all builds will include Point Blank and Hell's Chamber. Those are just your basic damage mods. Blaze is on this first build because it's an amazing damage mod, fire damage mod. And Seeking Force is the shotgun punch-through mod. It's great, again, for engaging groups of enemies. Now, the second build here uses Combustion Beam, and as well as Seeking Force. So you're getting that punch through, so you can hurt multiple enemies depending on how they're standing, as well as Combustion Beam, which causes enemies to explode when you've killed them. Obviously, most of the elemental mods are going to be the dual status chance elemental damage to increase that status chance as much as possible. Now, this last build is mostly just a pure damage build. It includes Sweeping Serration, which is increasing the already high slash damage, as well as having extra elemental damage mods on there as well. That is a pure damage build, not trying to do anything fancy, basically. This next weapon here is the Dragoon, which is arguably probably the best of the 3 shotguns that I'm going to present, just due to its base damage and other stats. The Dragoon's unique firing mechanism is that you can actually charge your shots of the Dragoon. When you fire it uncharged, you'll launch a huge blast of shrapnel, of flak, all over the place. The flak will ricochet once and then disappear. If you charge your shot, the flak will be much more focused. It will still only ricochet once, but it will also have an innate 2-meter punch through, which is very important for engaging enemies in groups. This also makes Seeking Force sort of irrelevant and unnecessary. If you want to have Seeking Force on there just to double the amount of punch through you have with the weapon, that's cool, but it's not really necessary, which is nice, especially since punch through is a really interesting mod to add onto your weapons, and it can really increase the amount of damage that you deal without actually increasing the amount of damage. It should also be mentioned that the punch through is affected by your charge. So if you only charge the Dragoon halfway, you'll get 1 meter punch through instead of the full 2 meters. If you charge the Dragoon all the way, you'll get the 2 meters. So it's a little bit different, and it's just one more benefit to charging. Now, as far as stats go, the charged shots and the non-charged shots actually deal different amounts of damage. The charged shots will deal 900 damage, mostly in slash. Non-charged shots will be dealing 345 damage. Now, obviously, those numbers are spread amongst all the individual flak, and again, this weapon does deal slash damage primarily, which means it's going to be excellent against infested. It does have a solid status chance, which is what we're going to be modding for the Dragoon, as well as a 7.5 crit chance and a 2.0 crit multiplier. Again, not really viable for that, but not the worst it could possibly be. Now, of course, we've got Primed Point Blank and Hell's Chamber. Shotgun Spaz is a fire rate mod that will increase your charge rate and make it faster. As far as the next 4 mods, we have 190% elemental damage mod and 3 dual status chance mods just to increase that status chance. Now, we also have the Fomorian Accelerant, which is the unique mod for the Dragoon that will increase the flight speed of the flak, as well as increase the number of times the flak ricochets. An amazing mod, and can really help this weapon just be a room-clearing machine. Now, these builds are actually pretty much all the same. I know, I lied before when I said I was going to give different ones. I apologize. But the Fomorian Accelerant is a really fun mod, and you can switch this out for different things. Like I said, if you want to, you can throw Seeking Force on there. One quick note about the Dragoon before we move on to the Phage. There is no damage fall off. Unlike almost every other shotgun in the game, no damage fall off at all with the Dragoon at range. That is incredibly important, and that's a huge advantage it has over the Heck and the Tigris. Now, the final weapon we're going to talk about today is probably the least viable of the 3, which is sad because it's such a cool looking and interesting weapon. This is actually the Phage is actually the grandfather of the Convectrix, because it is, again, a beam shotgun. It's an infested beam shotgun, but when you start firing, 7 beams will be basically, horizontal, and as you continue to fire, they will close in on 1 beam. It's a really cool firing mechanic, and I really like it, and it's just a really interesting thing to see in the game. And unfortunately, due to its damage and stats, this weapon isn't necessarily the most viable of the 3. It will deal base 330 viral damage, which you're thinking, viral, man, that's great. Viral damage is awesome, except the damage for this shotgun is so bad that there's not really a way to redeem it, necessarily. The crit chance is 10% for this weapon. The crit multiplier is 2.0. The weapon also has an innate 0.5 meter punch through. That is, unfortunately, according to the wiki, I cannot confirm that. It didn't seem like it to me that it had any punch through, but I could be going crazy. Now, the charge up for the phage is also 1.5 seconds, and there's absolutely no way to affect the charge up time. You can't do it with fire rate mods, you can't do it with anything. It's 1.5 seconds, period. And unfortunately with this weapon, the way the beams are is, unlike the Convectrix, which are all horizontal, the phage has some vertical beams as well, so it's kind of, they don't hit enemies as well as the Convectrix does. Now here is a build for you guys. Here, I do have Sinister Reach on this build just for fun. That is the mod that increases the beam range, the range of beams on all beam weapons, excuse me. As far as the rest of the mods go, I'm focusing on a 90% elemental damage to 90% elemental damage per build, plus 60% elemental damage and 60% status chance, because the status chance for this weapon is not great, honestly, which is unfortunate. And then I have Blaze on the weapon as well, because any way to buff the damage of the phage is something that you want. All in all, these weapons are definitely more interesting to use, and they're a little bit more interesting to mod for as well. You can do a little bit more with them, especially with that Dragoon. If you don't like Fomorian Accelerant, you can put on a different damage mod. You can put all kinds of different stuff on these shotguns to make them you know, a little different and kind of liven up your gameplay if you're tired of the same old song and dance of the Heck and the Tigress. Now, what I am upset about for these shotguns is that they are unique. They do have different firing mechanics that are interesting, but unfortunately, DE has made other more simple shotguns just objectively better. And that's a damn shame, honestly, because these are really interesting weapons, and I would love to see these weapons receive a buff, and not just a Riven mod buff, obviously, but an actual buff to bring them into the limelight a little bit. Let me know what you guys think of these mods in the comment section, these weapons down in the comment section below. I've been your host of the most.